Hi, this is Anson Garcia with Verizon, and today's video is on tips for running UC over LTE. And what I mean by UC is Webex, RingCentral, Microsoft Teams, and BlueJeans. How do we get that data utilization down? We know LTE has data caps. Some of them have data caps with overages, so we want to avoid that. Let's look at each of these platforms and see how we can reduce that data utilization. Okay, let me get some general info out to you first. Let's talk about bandwidth and rate adaptation. Now, all these UC platforms have traffic management, rate adaptation features where based on delay, loss, and jitter, when there's congestion basically on the transport, right, they're going to downgrade their video resolution, frame rate, and things like that. And they're also testing to see when that congestion goes away where they can upscale their video resolution, frame rate, and so on. So what I'm discussing here in this video are some tips and guidance to lessen the data usage on purpose. All right, not using the rate adaptation features, but actually lessening the data usage on purpose. So we all know when we're talking about LTE, we're talking about data usage caps and charging for overages, and this is what we want to mitigate. Okay, let's take a look at data usage, or this question we always get: just tell me how much bandwidth I need per person, and then I can make a quick calculator. And a lot of people try to do this. So how much bandwidth is needed per person in each of these UC applications? Based on the testing that I've done, the best you can do is take a swag at it, really. And all of these UC vendors publish their bandwidth needed for meetings, etc. Some of them even go to a little bit more granularity with video, audio, screen sharing, and things like that. Based on the testing that I've done, and it's been very extensive testing, platforms have varying data speeds based on many variables that sometimes the host and the participants have in their control during the meetings. Let me give you an example. If a participant switches to Microsoft Teams Together mode, what about if a BlueJeans user changes to gallery view? What about if a RingCentral user changes from gallery view to active speaker view? All these have different data usage profiles or bandwidth profiles, and they're substantial. They're not minimal. Sometimes, in fact, double the bandwidth when you change a view. And I'll show you some of that here in a minute. Another example, what about the host? The host shares content, right? Usually when you're hosting, you're sharing your content, things like that. And then some hosts, they don't really care about their video, right? It goes to a little thumbnail, or they put it on another screen or something like that. However, what if a host has the shared content on one screen and then he wants to interact with the audience on the other screen? So he pulls up a gallery view or active speaker view, and he maximizes that view for video. The bandwidth profile goes up. The data I gathered, let's go back to just sharing content, just sharing a screen, or just sharing your presentation. All the UC platforms went down in their bandwidth profiles from the host. But as soon as the host used a second screen for video to interact with the audience, it went up substantially, even further up than just doing the video conference alone. So some things to keep in mind. Okay, let's talk about tiered bandwidth plans, upload, downloads. Keep in mind that LTE, as well as most broadband transports, have asymmetrical speeds. And we've always concentrated on download speeds. Even our plans are kind of like that, right? 10, 25, 50. The reason that is because most applications are kind of consuming applications. Let's take, for example, like Salesforce or something. You click something, and that's just a digital click. That's a little bit of data going up into the cloud, the uplink. And then you get a whole bunch of data displayed on your screen. That follows the asymmetrical nature of broadband. However, UC platforms are applications that have more of a symmetrical data profile. You send audio and video, and you receive audio and video. Or you send shared content, and you receive shared content. So they're much different than your typical application. So what I'm saying here is, in my view, the upload speed is your least common denominator. So when you're kind of calculating in your mind and you're taking a swag at how many people can I support on this particular plan, you want to look at your upload speeds, not your download speeds. What do I mean by this? Everything's a meeting. So a few years ago, we started getting into these meeting platforms and things like that. One of the things that was coined during that time, during the inception of these things, was everything's a meeting. And it was kind of a marketing term, but what it meant was most of these platforms, when you make a business-to-business call or a person-to-person call, some of these platforms have that ability, right? Microsoft Teams, RingCentral, Webex. But when you make a person-to-person call, and let's say just inside a building or the next desk or the next office over, that particular media is going to be anchored in the cloud. Now, what does that mean? That means it's going to go to the cloud. Your video and audio is going to go to the cloud and then come back to the desk next to you. You got to be cognizant of that. Most of these UC applications do that. There's one that doesn't. I'll point that out later. Okay, let's talk about QoS. This is an obvious thing to do. I have another video on that. I'll link it down in the description. Okay, let's talk about avoiding using VPNs. No matter if you're using SD-WAN, VPN from the router, or VPN from the client. All these UC platforms already encrypt their voice, video, screen share, and things like that. So if you think about that, if you're encrypting data and then shoving it into another encrypted pipe, you're adding overhead, and that's going to add bandwidth. Okay, so let's go on to standard definition or no video if possible. So most of what I try to do here in this video is show you some ways to either stop video or go down to standard definition video and not use any high quality video or high definition video. Why is that? Because video is the biggest consumer of bandwidth, period. Okay, let's take a look at the UC platform flexibility. So if you can't watch a 30-minute video, I'm going to kind of summarize it here. Every UC platform has varying degrees of controls for mitigating data caps and overages. This is not something they've all been going after for a long time. So some of them have more, some of them have less. Here's a brief summary of what each of them can do. Number one, Microsoft Teams has the most control with the Teams meeting policy. This is where you can specify the media bit rate for audio, video, application sharing, and things like that. And basically, it's something like you can, let's say a 200 kilobit rate or a 100 kilobit rate. And what happens is whenever that you apply that policy to a person, and whenever that person joins a meeting or does a direct person-to-person call, it doesn't matter, the bit rate will not go up above that. So it'll lower the resolution, lower the frame rate, and things like that to keep under that threshold of what you apply to that policy. You also have some other things like no audio, and people then have to dial in, no video, and things like that. So there's more controls there, but that's the main one. Really good there. So Webex has some good admin controls on the Webex meeting side when it comes to using standard definition, high quality, or high definition. However, on the one-to-one calling and team space calling area, there's only user control on that platform. Okay, there's two platforms to Webex. Watch the rest of the video so you can understand how that works. RingCentral has some user-side controls for ensuring that you can use SD versus HD, and it also has some minimizing controls so you can minimize the gallery view. You know, the gallery view where the Hollywood squares, 4x4 or 2x2 or things like that. So there's some good controls there. However, they're on the user side also. So when I say user side, that's the desktop client. So there's going to have to be instruction or onboarding, training, and things like that to let these folks know, hey, you got to push this button or push that button to minimize the bandwidth usage. And how about BlueJeans? BlueJeans has a feature where the admin can configure muted video as participants enter the meeting. In other words, whenever you enter a meeting, the video will be muted by default. And you can also do that on the user side too, so on the client itself. However, users can still unmute their video if they want, but at least you can go into the meeting with video muted. And again, when it's on the user side, when the user can change things, that needs to be part of a company policy, training, onboarding instructions and things like that. So let's get into the rest of the meat of this and see what we can uncover with all these UC platforms. Okay, throughout the video when we're testing these platforms, I'm going to be talking about bandwidth profiles. And when I talk about bandwidth profiles, I'm really talking about the bandwidth usage right here from the LTE-BI router, the LTE router, to the tower. So this particular transport right here, that's where I'm going to show you some graphs of how much bandwidth particular participants or hosts are using during meetings. Most of the things that I've done in this is keep it real simple. I created a meeting or calling between two users, and these two users, you can see they're on the LAN side. I think there's one that I actually bring someone outside on the internet into a meeting, but that's just to show you something else. But so when I'm talking about bandwidth profiles within the context of this talk, I'm going to be talking about the bandwidth utilization right here. Okay, we're going to talk about BlueJeans first. What's recommended for BlueJeans? Well, in BlueJeans you can turn off participant video on entry, as I've said before. All right, this is at the user level, and you can also do it at the admin level, which I would suggest to do. What this does is to ensure people that come into the meeting that their video is muted. Now, they will have to choose to enable their video manually, and they can do that, so there's no way to stop that. How do we do this? I'm going to show you how to do it on the BlueJeans desktop client, and I'm going to show you how to do it in the BlueJeans admin portal as well. But first, let me show you the bandwidth profile, how much bandwidth we're actually taking when we do no video and we do video. So here you see the bandwidth profile from a voice-only call. You can see that's negligible there. As far as bandwidth, remember we're looking at the LTE interface. And then when we turn up video, okay, now this is two people. Remember our test subjects over there on the left in that diagram was Anson and Lynn. So Anson and Lynn are in a meeting in BlueJeans. And then what I did right here is turn on only one participant's video. Average probably 3 meg, something like that. So you can kind of extrapolate from that. If both people use video, if I would have turned up video on the other person, then we would get a little bit higher than this. Okay, first, let me show you from the user's perspective how you can enable this feature. First, we want to go into our meeting settings, and from there, we're dropped into settings here, and if we go straight down, we're going to see right here, turn off participant video on entry. Okay, turns off video participants automatically when they join the meeting. I'll tell you why that's grayed out in a minute, but this is what you would want to click, or you have your users click to enable, so we can mute that video when we go in. Now, what does this do? Well, let's close this. Let's go back over here and let's start a meeting. You can see my video is on here. I'm going to start a meeting and watch what happens. I didn't click that, by the way. See, this meeting is set to mute video by default. So it's going to mute the video, and anyone else coming into this meeting is going to be muted as well. All right, so you have to deliberately unmute yourself. Okay, let me show you how to do it from the admin settings now. So I'm going to go over to admin settings. This particular user has the administration role, and we're going to go to manage features here, and we're going to go to user settings. And if I scroll just about all the way down, I'm going to have this turn off participant video on entry. Okay, I'm going to click that, and then I want to put that as enterprise default. So users that are already existing and created in the future are going to have this setting. And then remember, on our user settings, it was grayed out so the user couldn't change it. This is the guy right here. If we unclick that, we're not going to allow users to change that configuration back. Okay, for RingCentral, everything is a meeting. Remember, I said that before. Just be aware that whenever you make a one-to-one call, so RingCentral has the ability to make a call from person to person, unlike BlueJeans that we just left. When you make this call, again, if it's on the LAN side, if you're calling someone just down the hall, the next desk or whatever, that call is going to be anchored in the cloud. What can we do with RingCentral? Well, we can do something on the desktop client side for standard definition video and HD video. Like I said, we want to stick with standard definition video, and we can also lessen the max participant view when we're looking at a gallery. And that's going to lessen our bandwidth profile. So let's take a look at how that looks. Okay, first let's look at the logical real quick. And I just want to state again that when we're making a person-to-person call or a meeting, everything is going to be anchored in the cloud. My purple line, dotted line, is signifying that even if Anson calls Lynn, this media is going to go out to the cloud and then come back and then go to Lynn. Doesn't matter. Lynn here is on the same LAN switch you see. And let's take a look at the bandwidth profile. We want to use standard definition video as opposed to HD video. And the bandwidth profile here you can see is very different. So here is Anson and Lynn in a meeting or a call. Doesn't matter. It uses the same technology. The same things are going to happen. Here we are at, let's see, the max is 7 megs right there. And you can see we're, roughly half that. So standard definition video, definitely going to save you some bandwidth and stay away from those overages and stay away from that data usage cap. One more data usage profile I want you to look at, and this is done with more participants. So we're not talking about just Anson and Lynn. We're talking about a bunch of participants joining a RingCentral meeting. But I want you to look at here the trend as people join the meeting. Remember what we're looking at when I show you these bandwidth profiles. We're looking at the LTE interface. That's it. And remember that Anson and Lynn are the only ones on the LAN. Everyone else that's joined here is out on the internet. However, you can see as people join the meeting, the bandwidth profile starts and continues to go up. Okay, you can see that here. That's because of that gallery view that I was talking about a second ago. And let's take a look at that too, how we tweak that to make sure that we stay away from this trend of going up, more people that join the meeting. Okay, let's take a look at how we do this standard definition and lowering the maximum participants in a gallery view. Before we do that, I just want you to look right here. This platform is one of those platforms. Again, as I said before, you can call. So like I'm chatting with Lynn here, I can choose to give her a video call or an audio call. Okay, and just remember, whenever I do this, it's anchored in the cloud, as I said before. So let's look at how we change these settings to make sure that we're going to mitigate our data profile. We go over to settings, we're going to click on video here, and if we go edit the video settings, there's going to be two things that we want to look at under video here. And you see these two right here, this use HD for video. We don't want that selected. Gallery view by default, it's over here at 16, and we want to pull that back to max visible participants to 4. That way we're going to avoid this instance right here. Let me just go back to that data profile here. Remember I said this goes up as people join. Okay, we want to avoid that because we're going to increase our data profile even if they're on the internet joining. Okay, let's take a look at Webex now. We have 2 different meeting platforms on Webex. So this is kind of confusing a little bit, but hopefully I can help you understand it. So one-to-one calls and team space calls have separate video settings than the Webex personal meeting room or scheduled meetings. If you think back how Webex or Cisco used to run things, remember they had Webex meetings, right? That had support center, training center, event center, meeting center. And then they came out with this new thing, Webex Teams, right? It was called Spark at first, but Webex Teams is what I still call it today. Although Cisco has changed the name to just Webex and then Webex Meetings for the meetings portion. However, these 2 platforms have different settings, and hopefully in the demo you can understand the difference between them. So again, what do we want to do here? We want to reduce bandwidth both on the Teams meetings and one-to-one calls, and also when we have or use our personal meeting room or scheduled meetings, event support training center, things like that. In the desktop client is where we control one-to-one calls and team meeting spaces as far as HD or SD. And then in the Webex site, specifically meeting site, that's where we control the standard definition or high definition for the personal meeting rooms, scheduled meeting rooms, events, training center, things like that. Okay, let's talk about the platform itself, and remember everything is a meeting. Remember I said that? Well, Webex is the same way. Everything is a meeting, and you can see here whether I do a one-to-one call or a meeting, you can see everything is anchored in the cloud here. So if Anson calls Lynn, it's going to anchor in the cloud. If Anson has a meeting with Lynn, it's going to anchor in the cloud. Let's take a look at this bandwidth profile here. You can see here's a meeting between Anson and Lynn, and HD is enabled. So you can see we're using maybe 8 meg, something like that. That's significant, especially over the course of time, the many meetings over the course of months. We want to stay away from those overages. So if we just choose to disable HD, we can have much less of a bandwidth profile here. We're hovering around 2 meg right there. That's going to get us a much further as far as staying away from our data overages. Okay, now we've left the space meetings and the one-to-one meetings platform behind. Now we're just talking about the Webex scheduled meetings and personal meeting rooms. Okay, now the settings are different. Remember I told you that we can do 360 and 720, or if we don't do 360 and 720, then it falls back to 180p. Okay, so what I have here is 360 and 720 on and 360 and 720 off. Okay, so let me show you here the difference in the bandwidth profile. So with them on, 2 participants in a meeting, we get 3 meg. With them off, we get 1 meg. Now, it's important to note, I put this note down here, when I did this meeting here, it only used HQ video. Even though these 2 were on, 720 was on, it did not do 720. It only did high quality video, the 360. I'll tell you why, or you'll understand why in just a second. Let's go to the next profile here. Okay, here's another one. Again, 2 participants. Now we have 360 and 720 on. Let's see what happens if I change the view. Okay, so here we were again at 3 meg, but I just changed the view. One of the users changed the view, and what happened was, kind of default out of the box, Webex will display, there's just 2 people in a meeting, it'll display you on one box and the other distant party on the other box. All right, and they're kind of equal boxes, little gallery view, 2x2 gallery view, basically what it's called. But if I'm consuming that meeting, I usually don't want to see myself. Maybe I can see myself in a thumbnail or something, but I changed the view. As soon as I did that here with just one person, so this is just one person that I changed the view, and what happened was we went up to, 5 meg, something like that. Now, if I would have changed the view for both people in the meeting, it would have went higher than this. So this goes to the fact that I was talking about earlier, that it's kind of hard to peg, how people are going to consume meetings, because you change something, one of the participants or the host, and the bandwidth changes. Let's take a look at the next profile. I put a few of them in here because these were interesting. Here we're still with Webex meetings and PMR again. Now we have 2 participants, 360 and 720 are off now, so the only option we have is 180. Now, let's go see what happens. So here's the default layout, right? I join the meeting, or 2 people join the meeting, and they have the 2x2 coming up. Now the user, just like before, we're going to change one of the user's layouts right here, and you can see, although there's a little blip, I think that was just an anomaly, but we come back to about the same bandwidth. In other words, 180 small or 180 big is still 180 and still takes the same amount of bandwidth. So this is good when we're talking about data caps and LTE and things like that. So this is what I would recommend here. So let me see if I can explain the 2 platforms I was talking about before. Okay, remember I said there's one platform that handles person-to-person calls, whether they be audio or audio and video, and space meetings. And then secondly, we have the other one, the personal meeting room, scheduled meetings, training, and all that other stuff. Let me show you first. Here I'm in a chat. Here's Lynn. If I make a video call to Lynn, I'm using the Webex Teams platform. If I go into Teams here and go into one of my teams and go into one of my spaces and I hit meet, to meet with all these people right here. Remember, this is going to create a meeting, voice, video, screen share, and all that. If I click this, I'm also using Webex Teams platform. Okay, for these two things, again, one-to-one calling and space or team space meetings, my lever that I can pull to only use standard definition video and lower my bandwidth profile is going to be in my settings on my desktop client here. So I go to settings, I go to video, and there's the only lever I have. I can enable HD video or I can disable it. You want to disable it. Again, you saw the data usage profile just a second ago, and we're going to use, instead of 8 meg for 2 people in a call, to 2 meg. Again, real quick, that setting is going to both do when I call somebody like this, I call in like that, person-to-person call, and also when I'm in a team space and hit meet right there. So now let's change gears. What about the personal meeting room, meetings, scheduled meetings, event training center, and all that other stuff? That's different. And if we click on this icon right here, a little calendar icon, here's where we have the traditional Webex meeting stuff. Start a meeting, join a meeting, schedule a meeting. Remember, this is the same as Webex meetings used to be before, and then they kind of added Teams. This is your traditional meeting center stuff. Now, where do I go? If I start a meeting, it's not going to take my settings that I have here. It's going to use different settings. Where are those different settings? Where they're in these site options, common settings. Let's go take a look at those. Okay, we are in Webex Control Hub now, and what we're going to do is we're going to go down to our services and meeting. Okay, now this is where our sites are for the Webex meetings, and I'm using this website right here. If I go down, I configure site. This is the old portal for Webex meetings. Okay, and remember, we're talking about Webex meetings now, not the Webex Teams meetings. We're going to go to site options here, and if we go to site options and we scroll down, we're going to find that we have 2 items right here. Turn on high quality video, so we can turn on 360p video as opposed to 180. And then we can also turn on 720. So to have 720, we have to have 360. But here's where you would scale down the bandwidth profile for your users that are doing personal meeting rooms, scheduled meetings, and things like that. Again, let's go back, and sometimes this is confusing. It was for me. Let's go back over here. So if I talk to somebody and just point-to-point call them, one-to-one call, like right here, okay, and let's just do that so you see what that looks like. I'm going to call. Let's hop over to Lynn's. You can see a call's coming in. We can answer that call right there. And that is a person-to-person call. Okay, now let's go back over to Anson, and let's just go ahead and hang this call up here. What the settings I used for that person-to-person call in my chat was this setting right here, video. Okay, and it did not do HD video. Let's go over to and start a meeting. Okay, let me start a meeting here. This is my personal meeting room. Let me start the meeting here. I'll go ahead and start my video. Okay, and so you can see that's going on now, and let's get Lynn to join the meeting here. And the way I will do that is come over here, I copy the meeting link, and I can go message her. So over here in chat, remember she was in chat over here, I can paste it in there. There's also another, and I don't want to confuse you, but there's also another way to do that. It's right here. But you can invite someone to your personal meeting room by clicking that button right there. But what I did is just paste it in there. Let's go over to Lynn. Okay, she's got a message. And there it is. We'll close that. And I'll go ahead and just click on this. That's going to start my Webex meeting. And we're going to come in there, and now we're in the meeting. Okay? So we're in the meeting as opposed to one-to-one call. All right? Oh, well, I didn't join. There we go. And there we are. Okay, and we're using standard definition video here because I have that off, remember, inside the site options, common settings in Webex site admin. Okay, let's see. Anything else I need to show you here? And again, let's go over back to Anson. Close that little guy there. The other way to do this, if you're chatting with someone and you don't use this because you might invite other people, you can click on this little icon right here, and that's going to give you your URL right there, and you can send that to Lynn. You can join this way, and that's also using the Webex meetings platform. Okay, let's take a look at Microsoft Teams here. So in Microsoft Teams, the very cool thing that we have here is the Meetings Teams policy. Okay, so Meetings Teams policy is it's a policy that you can specify a particular upper limit bit rate, and then you can apply that policy to users, and it will basically ensure that the media bit rate for audio, video, and screen sharing doesn't exceed what you specified in the policy. Now, this is really cool because it works for both calls and meetings. So in other words, point-to-point calls and meetings. It works both for the uplink and the downlink media. I really love this feature because it gives a lot of granular control to the admins over how to manage their bandwidth profiles for users that are at a data cap site or an LTE-BI site or something like that. I've tested this at 500 kilobits. I've tested it at 250 kilobits. And I think I have a screenshot for you here. It's pretty good. I mean, you can see facial expressions and things like that at 250 kilobits. Yeah, I give it high marks as far as being data cap, LTE-BI friendly. So let's take a look at how we do it. One thing to point out here is, unlike all the other UC platforms, when you make a one-to-one call, you go from Anson to Lynn. So if Anson calls Lynn or Lynn calls Anson, the media is going to stay local. Remember, all the others, no matter if we made a point-to-point call or a meeting, it was still anchored out and used WAN bandwidth or LTE bandwidth here. Microsoft doesn't do that. When you make one-to-one calls, it's going to go from PC or desktop client to desktop client. Obviously, if you make a call, one-to-one call outside to another site, obviously that's not going to be the case. But if you have a small office with a few people that call each other, this is going to benefit you. Let's take a look at the bandwidth profile. So what do I have here? I have a meeting policy that's attached to two users, and they're in a meeting. So Anson and Lynn are in a meeting, and you can see I have the meeting policy at 250 kilobits. Remember, I said it's for outbound, inbound. So if we do 250 kilobits outbound from Anson, 250 kilobits inbound for Anson, 250 kilobits outbound for Lynn, 250 kilobits inbound for Lynn, well, that's going to equal 1 meg, right? So we're keeping everything within 1 meg. And again, you can go all the way down to 30 kilobits here. Now, it's not going to look very good. I can assure you 250 looks pretty good. And I took a screenshot just so you can see what a 250 kilobit meeting policy looks like. You can see the back of my head there, but it looks pretty good. You know, you could see if I would turn around, you could see my facial expressions and if I'm listening or not, if I'm engaging, where I'm looking and things like that. Let's take a look at a different profile now, bandwidth profile. And what I want to point you to here now is I had another one, a 500, and that's where we're at 500. And again, the math works out okay. Two people in a meeting with a 500 kilobit meeting profile, or meeting policy, I should say. But over here, this area right here is where I want to show you right here. And here, from here this way, this is the default meeting policy. Okay, so that's how much a bandwidth two people would use in just two people in a meeting. Okay, I had the default meeting policy, Teams meeting policy. So remember, it's going to use as much as it can. Now, obviously, if you have less bandwidth or you don't have 10 megs, it's going to do the traffic management and rate adaptation and things like that. But remember, we're trying to lessen the data bandwidth to stay away from our data caps. And here I just added an extra person just to see what it would do. So it went up to 14. So you can see another person joining. This person was on the LAN side. The bandwidth profile went up. You can see you can save a lot of bandwidth using the Microsoft Teams meeting policy. Okay, we're going to head over to the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. I'm going to show you how to do a Teams meeting policy and add it to a user. First thing we go over to is our meetings drop down. We're going to go into meeting policies here. And then you can create a new meeting policy if you want to here. I won't do that. I'll go ahead and take you to one of the ones I've already created. Here's the 250 and the 500, the ones I was using to test. Now, these are just named what I named them, so you can name them whatever you want to. Let's go into 250. And if we go down here, there's this setting right here. And I'm going to pull this up, this little I information here. And if you want to, hopefully you can stop the video and zoom in here if you want to read that. Or you can go ahead and just Google Microsoft Teams meeting policy. Okay, so we can set it to 250, and that's exactly what I did. That's what the data profiles or the bandwidth profiles that I showed you with those two participants, Anson and Lynn, joining a meeting and only using 250 down, 250 up each person. Now, the other thing I'd like to point you to just as an extra here is you can also turn off video. If you wanted to turn off video completely, you can do that. So participants that are or users that are attached to this meeting policy wouldn't have video at all, wouldn't be able to turn on their video. And then you can also mute video itself, so they wouldn't even receive video. And you can also mute audio where they have to dial in into the conference with their PSTN phone or something like that. So yeah, that's how you do that. And then we would want to attach those to users. Let's go over to a user. We're going to manage users here, and then we'll go over to Anson here. He should already have that since I was testing with him last. And we go to policies here. And if we edit the policy, you can see I have a drop-down list of the meeting policies now. All this can be done through PowerShell. You can do a bunch of users at one time. So yeah, that's how you do the Microsoft meeting policy. I hope this has been educational for you, and thank you for watching.